All right. Good evening. Good to see you, Phyllis, Gloria, Erwin, Audrey. Someone whose name is called connecting to audio, at least from what I can see. And whoever else is with us and joining us momentarily. We find ourselves on Lamed Zayin Amud Aleph on 37a. And we are continuing our discussion about putting together the lulavim, the hadas, and the aravos. And we left off talking about Shitas Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yehuda's opinion in particular. Rabbi Yehuda had a more restrictive idea of what is required. He said that when you bind together the four species, the Arba Minim, you could only use something that's made of the four species itself. So we use the lulav to bind together the rest of the species. So the esrogs, on the other hand, we'll talk about why in next week's share, God willing. And so we're just picking it up about a quarter way down Lamed Zayin Amud Aleph, about a quarter way down 37a. We're at the words Umi Amar Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, Umi Amar Rabbi Yehuda. And did Rabbi Yehuda really say? It's probably either at the end of the first page in Art Scroll or the beginning of the second page in Art Scroll. That would be my guess. Okay. Umi Amar Rabbi Yehuda Arbas Minen. In Midiachrina Lo, did Rabbi Yehuda really assert that you could only have the four species and you're not allowed to use something else in order to tie it all together? But Tanya, but we have a brisa which seemingly contradicts this. Not only a brisa, I should say, but it's a brisa which records Rabbi Yehuda himself. Rabbi Yehuda is a Tana. He could be at odds with a brisa, but we're going to see that seemingly he's inconsistent within his own opinions. What's it say in the brisa? Sichacha ben asarm shel erez, sheyish ben dalat tvachim divrei kol. So this should sound familiar from the first parak. I think it's with the first parak. That if you begin to use boards for schach made out of cedar wood, if they are 4 tvachim wide, everyone agrees that's too wide and it is puzzle. If it's less than 4 tefachim, Rabbi Meir posel Rabbi Yehuda machshir. That's a machlokis between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda. Umed Rabbi Meir she'im yesh bein neser l'neser kamalei neser shemniach pesel beinein ukshera. Rabbi Meir says as long as you put some actual branches, let's say, in between these boards, it would be kosher. Now, all this is to say that Rabbi Yehuda clearly it's fundamentally okay using cedar wood for schach, even though Rabbi Yehuda was one of the opinion that not only are you restricted to the Daled Minim, to the four species for your, four species, but also your schach would need to be from one of the four species as well. Yet we see Rabbi Yehuda going on record saying the only issue with a board is its dimension. Maybe it's too wide. But if it's made out of cedar, there's no issue with the actual material. So cedar, as far as I know, is not one of the it's not one of the four minim. Or is it? My erez hadas. No, actually, cedar wood is apparently very similar to hadas. They are classified together. And how do I know that? Kidarava barav huna damarava barav huna amri be rav. Asara mine arazmi. There are 10 kinds of subspecies of cedar. Shnemar, attain bamidbar erez shita fi hadas. We see that hadassim, the myrtle, and the cedar are put in the same pasuk together. Now, I guess I just don't know enough about trees and herbology or whatever you call it. Entomology? Whatever. No, it's ants. That's bugs. Whatever it's called. What do you call the study of trees, guys? Help me out here. Oh, well, Gloria, it looks like you have it, but you're muted.
Botany?
Botany. Is that it? Okay. What's a botany is flowers, but I guess it applies to trees too. Let's go with that. It looks like Gloria just froze. I'm sorry to make you touch your computer, Gloria. Okay. We'll go with that for now. People still hear me, right? Okay, I got a nod from Audrey.
Yeah.
That's good. All right, and Erwin. Okay. So hopefully Gloria's computer will comply and rejoin us soon. Okay, it's like that moment where Yaakov Avinu, right? Jacob was asked by his kids to reveal to them when Mashiach would come, and then all of a sudden, Hashem made it lapse from his memory before he could tell us. So I feel like it was it was one of those moments. Gloria,
I wanted to say an arborist.
Ooh,
Yeah.
Those are the fancy terms.
Arborist.
Not the same as an arsonist.
Not an arsonist.
That's the guy who burns down the trees. All right. So back to our feature presentation. Apparently, cedar and hadassah and myrtle are classified together. And so Rabbi Huda is still consistent in limiting even the schach of your sukkah to being comprised of one of the 4 species. He just has perhaps a more liberal definition of what constitutes the 4 species. Very good. Going forward, Rabbi Meir Omer Afilu Mashicha. So if you remember in the Mishnah, Rabbi Meir is the one who debates Rabbi Huda. He says you could even use golden, you use linen, and you can even use golden rings for binding your lulav together. Gold is certainly not one of the 4 species. It's a metal. Tanya, I'm Rabbi Meir. Maisa b'yikare Yerushalayim. There was a story about the precious ones of Jerusalem. That they would wrap their lulavim with golden rings. Amrlo, they said, Misham Raya, the Minoha Ogden Samilmata. That's not really the ironclad proof that you think it is, because in truth, they bound it with gold on top, but where the lulavim and hadassah and rose all joined together at the base, that was still bound together, let's say, by lulav material. It wasn't bound together with gold. The gold was just the cherry on top, if you will. So, and that basically was kind of from our mission already. There's a little bit of a question about why it repeated itself. We'll just leave it as is. Amar lahu Rabbi lano megadli hoshana debei reish galusa. Rabbah instructed those who would put together the lulavim for the, as they call it in English, I think the exilarch. There's a word you don't see outside the context of the Talmud, right? So when they were putting together his lulavim, Rabbah said, Ki gadlisa hoshana, when you're putting the lulav together, the beir's glusa, shire beis yad, you should leave enough space to hold it like a hilt. Ki heichi lo tihavi chatzitza, lest it be separation, lest there be an interposition. In other words, even if you're using these different kinds of materials, at very least you have to be able to hold the arba minim. You have to be able to hold the lavim, hadassah, and rose directly without anything interposing. However, Rav Amar, kol linauso eno chotzetz. Even if it's not one of the 4 species, if you're putting it on there in order to beautify it, that's not considered a separation. That's not interposing between you and lulavim and the lulav. Now, it actually just popped into my head. I'm sure someone brings this up. This reminds me of what we learned a lot earlier in the Masechta. Remember how we said that you need a minimum amount of airspace in the sukkah? You need a height minimum of 10 tfachim. So that's the minimum height of a sukkah. And we mentioned, what if you put decorations in the sukkah? Would that basically, let's say, take away a tefach because they're hanging down? And we said, noi sukkah does not detract from the sukkah because it's meant to enhance it. It's meant to beautify it. So I think there's a similar kind of logic going on over here, but we'll leave that as is. Going forward, similar kind of machlokes. Rabbah said that when you hold your lulav and esrog, you should not be holding them in a handkerchief of some kind. You should be holding it directly with your bare hands. If you're holding it with, let's say, gloves, or you're holding it with a handkerchief, that's okay. That's still, if you're wearing gloves and you do something, that's still called your hand doing something, right? You wouldn't say, here's another one that just occurred to me. I know it doesn't necessarily always get practiced so well, but in theory, a man and woman who are married to each other are, according to many poskim, aren't supposed to even shake hands. They're not supposed to touch each other at all. And the question is, well, what if he or she is wearing gloves? And I'm pretty sure all the poskim dismiss that because they say, come on, yeah, there's a cloth over there, but that's your hand. So it's a similar kind of logic. Amarava. Now, how do I know? It sounds nice logically, but Rava says, I'll prove to you that just because you are holding a handkerchief, you're wearing gloves, that's not called an interposition. That's still called you holding it. How do I know this? So we have to go into the laws of Tahara. When someone becomes exposed to tumas mace, let's say directly to a cadaver. So during the times of the temple, the way that they would become tahor, ritually pure again, is through the ashes and the water mixture from the para aduma, the iconic and enigmatic red heifer. So in that process, we actually talked about this a while ago also, because of Akudas Azov, they would use the what do you call it? Hyssop. I think it's called hyssop, right? Azov is hyssop. Not, you see, the thing is, like, I translate, I'm like, I don't even know what a hyssop is. It's again, Tarabotany or arbory. What was it? What was it, Gloria?
Arborist.
Arborist. Okay, so going to there, someone could look it up on Google Images. So it says in the Mishnah, Tnan Azov Kutzar. Let's say your hyssop is too short. Misaf go bechut, you should put a string on it, and ubechush. Okay, all right, art scroll people, help me out over here. How do they render that word ubechush? With a thread and with a
Spindle.
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 Ah, very good. Oh, and I see there's a Rashi on here actually also. What does Rashi say? Rashi says, Pelech, right, Pelech, Shanashim Tavospo, the spindle that the women use for weaving, or not the stage before weaving, spinning. So, right, for those of you, my friends, who are with me, traumatized, putting the scissors together on Sunday, right? Audrey, how are you managing over there? I think I need to go to therapy after this. I only got through two corners. It kept unraveling on me. But in theory, not theory, in practice, we were doing the tying stage, but there's a stage prior to that which is called tvia, which is, how do you think you get those strings? So that's called when you spin it together and make the strings. That's tvia, and that's what the spindle is used for. So there's our connection to the tzitzis. All right. And so you basically, right. So you put the spindle, you put the string together. That way you can kind of lower it in to the kli, and that way the tovel umala, and then you would take it out after it gets wet for oches be'esov and umasa, and then you would hold the hyssop directly with your hands, and you would sprinkle. Now Rashi points out the reason that you then hold the hyssop with your hand is not because you need to hold it directly, but because otherwise it would be pretty hard to what do you call it? To wave it properly if you're still holding the spindle with the string and everything. Rashi says, Shem also besipuko huminanea kan maza ala kli. So you wouldn't be able to direct it properly. But point being is, amai v'lakach v'tova. It says in the pasuk, you have to take the hyssop and then dip it in. Amrachmana. Ela shramina lekicha didavar acher shma lekicha. It seems from here that even though you're holding it via a spindle, which is via a string, nonetheless, that's called holding something, even though there's a few steps in between. Now, you might argue that maybe it's different because here you actually attached the spindle with the string to the hyssop. So now they are considered one unit. But maybe in the case of holding a lulav and esrog with my glove or with a handkerchief, the handkerchief is not a single unit together with the lulav and esrog. So maybe this is not such a good analogy. So el mehacha, still sticking with the same area of halacha, nafal mishifoferis l'shokes pasal. If the ashes, which are supposed to go into the water to make the special mixture, if those ashes fell in by themselves rather than you putting it in directly, hahipilo, hahipilo, who kosher. So if it fell in, it's kosher. Amai, didn't God say in the Torah, you shall take and you shall give, you should put it in yourself? So we see that even if you put it in indirectly, that's still called taking it. Okay. Just go a little bit further. Sticking again to the same machlokes. Rabba says that when you put the lulav in, you shouldn't stick it right in between into the holder with the hadass and the ravos. It's kind of what we do, I guess, because some leaves of the lulav might detach and fall off. And once the leaves detach from the lulav, they're basically interposing between the lulav and hadass and the ravos. However, Rabba's not concerned. Rabba Amar, well, they're lulav leaves. Big deal. That's not considered chatzitza, even though they're separated from the lulav. And then final section, V'amar Rabba lo ligos inish lulav b'hoshana d'mishtari hutza tavi chatzitza. If you need to, for some reason, have a very tall lulav, you want to cut the bottom of the lulav, so you should not cut it from the bottom when it's attached, when it's already bound together, because again, those leaves will detach, but they will stay in the holder, and then there'll be a chatzitza. Rava Amar min b'mino eino chotzeit. So big deal. There's a bunch of leaves, but there won't be a chatzitza. Now I'll just point out one thing on Shabbos at the 7 to 8 o'clock meeting, and I also mentioned at Shal Shudas, where Moshe has a tshuva about whether a shochet, ritual slaughterer, needs to wear is allowed to wear gloves when doing shechita. And not to get too much into the minutia of it, but interestingly, he references, I believe, our sugya here. And he says that even though there is a debate about whether you can wear gloves when holding a lulav and esrog, that's because what's the mitzvah lulav and esrog? Now, the shaking that we do is nice and everything, but the primary mitzvah, when do you accomplish a mitzvah of lulav and esrog? At what moment? What do you have to do?
Put them together.
That's a preparatory stage. You got to go one step further. That's good preparation.
I thought it's just the lakachta.
Very good. The moment that you pick it up, which, by the way, that's why when we pick it up initially, we hold the esrog upside down. That way, and then we make the bracha and turn it right side up. That way, because otherwise you would have picked it up and you would have been yotzei the mitzvah. And generally, when you make a bracha, you're supposed to do it over la siyasan. You make the bracha and then you do the mitzvah. Similar in a sense to when we do birchas and then, like you want to make a bracha on an apple. So I don't eat the apple and then make a eitz. I make borei priya eitz and then I take a bite out of the apple. So it's a similar kind of idea as well. So that's basically the gist of it. All right. So we'll end here about a quarter way down Lamed Vav on the base 36b, and God willing, we will pick it up next week. Right. So there's no shiur this Thursday because that's why we're doing it tonight. And so next week, a week from this Thursday, we will hopefully continue. I will probably move the shiur time a little bit earlier again. Just stay tuned for emails. All right. Have a wonderful evening, everyone. Take care.
Thank you very much. You too.
Thank you. Good learning together.